Speaking of George Bush, how do you think history will rate him, and how should history rate him?
Yeah, well, now you come to what is possibly the most controversial idea I've ever entertained in my entire life.
That he's a great man.
That he's a great man and will be regarded as a great president in the future. And here I once again compare him to Harry Truman, with whom he has a great deal in common. Those of you who are, again, old enough to remember, Truman was even more unpopular than Bush was at this stage of his presidency. His ratings were down in the low 20s. Bush has never fallen below the low 30s. He was despised. He was regarded as a contemptible little hack, product of the Kansas City Pendergast political machine. He was incompetent. He was an embarrassment to the United States. In fact, he was in such bad shape in 1950 that he could have run again, but he chose not to because he knew he didn't have a prayer of winning. And the idea, and by the way, the Korean War, which was raging at that point, in which we had lost not 3,000 or whatever it is now, 4,000 men, but 37,000 American dead, 10 times as many nearly, was at least as unpopular and probably more unpopular than the Iraqi campaign is today. Nevertheless, here we are, 40 years later, 50 years later, and everybody looks back and says Harry Truman was a great president. Why? Because Harry Truman recognized in 1947-48, when the dimensions and seriousness of the Soviet threat, when many were poo-pooing it and saying there was no such threat. If there was any threat, it came from us. He recognized the threat. He rose to it, and he outlined a strategy for contending with it that ultimately prevailed. It took 42 years through the Truman Doctrine. I see Bush as the same kind of figure. He recognized the dimensions and seriousness of the Islamo-fascist threat. He has designed a strategy for contending with it. He has, in spite of incredible pressures, I sometimes wonder how that guy can get up in the morning, let alone do anything. In spite of incredible pressures, persisted in trying to implement that strategy. He hasn't carried it as far as I think he thought he would, and as I hoped he would, but he's set us on a course that I think is the right one, and that will be very difficult for anyone to deviate from successfully. As many people in the Middle East, you don't read this much in the New York Times, are saying, Middle East will never be the same. That Bush has done to the Middle East what Napoleon did when he invaded. He unfroze the region, and things are now becoming possible that were not even thinkable before. That is, possibilities of reform, again, in the long run, not overnight. And so he set it on a course toward an eventual transformation that I believe when we win this war, and I say when rather than if, because I can't, even though I won't live to see it, I can't bear to imagine that we would permit ourselves to lose this war, that the Middle East will look a little bit like East Europe, East and Central Europe looked and still look after our victory in the Cold War, World War III. Infinitely better off than it was under communism. Some countries doing much better than others, Poland, Hungary, so on. Others not doing so well. But with and Russia backsliding, but with the secular trend, nevertheless, moving in the direction of greater liberty, both and prosperity. And I think that's something like what will happen at the end with the victory in World War IV.
So.